Now we're going to look at the L2 Ultra Maximizer. Now, as I said in the introduction video, the L1 Ultra Maximizer, the predecessor to the L2, was released in the early 90s as Wave's second plugin, and it literally took the world by storm because it was the first digital limiter that gave us trustworthy level insurance so we could maximize levels without fear of overs. And at the same time, it included Wave's IDR section, which is a requantizer and dithering system, which we'll cover in more detail shortly. So after dominating the scene for several years, Waves upped the ante and released the L2. Now I'll get the L1 up next to the L2 so we can see the difference. So that's our L2 over there, and here's the L1. Now, largely it's the same type of layout as you can see. The L1 did include these dual input faders here, which actually I find quite useful. So to be honest, that's a bit of a loss on the L2 for me, but sometimes I'll even put the L1 in front of the L2 just so I can rebalance left and right on some lopsided masters if need be. Now you can see though that they're largely the same. The real significant visual difference is this ARC control down here, which stands for Automatic Release Control. And that's a great advantage on the L2 because rather than the fixed release that the L1 has here, which as you can see is on 1 millisecond, goes all the way up to a full second, but generally defaults to 1 millisecond. The same thing is here, but it's grayed out because the ARC is in control, it's automatic. And what this does is allows the limiter to control the release time in real time in reaction to the program source that it's being fed. So it's kind of a form of intelligence. If there's a lot of deep bass content in there, it'll slow the release down in order to accommodate that, and so on. So it'll actually move around in real time. The only other significant difference under the hood is that the noise shaping algorithm over here in the IDR has got an improved ninth order filter. But look, that's getting a bit geeky. We won't cover that at this stage. Other than that, the performance of the two is very similar, and I'll actually show a null test after to show that. And it's really the ARC that makes all the difference. I'll just close this off for now, and we'll have a look at the L2. Now these processors and all the processors in the Waves L family are very easy to use, even the more complicated ones that we'll get to later. But this is probably the simplest to use because there's very few controls, just this threshold, this out ceiling, and I recommend you leave the release alone anyway and leave the ARC control on. So really it's just those two controls you have to deal with in the limiting section. And just to differentiate, everything that I'm circling here is to do with the limiting section. And over here, this little vertical IDR strip, that's to do with the requantizing and the dithering. Requantizing meaning that you'll take something down to a lower bit resolution, and dithering being the process we apply to it while we do that to make sure there's no artifacts in that process. But as I said, we're going to cover IDR in a separate tutorial next, so we'll just forget that for now and deal with just the limiting side of this processor. So first the threshold, and put simply, just like in a compressor, this sets the level at which the limiting occurs. But unlike most compressors, it actually has an automatic makeup gain as you move it. So let me give you an example of that. Now this is a track here by a local Melbourne Australian band called The April Tree. And I'll be using that and another one over here by New York-based rock band The Blems as my examples in this tutorial. So I'll play now. And I'm going to start bringing the threshold down and listen to what happens. So as I turn it down, the track's getting louder. And now I'm slamming into this ceiling here, which is currently set to 0. The track's getting louder and louder and then softer again. So this automatic makeup gain makes it easy to just get your track up to the level you want, and there you go. So that's the threshold. The other control, the out ceiling, is simply how loud do you want the final output to be. And effectively it's like a volume control, but it's a roof volume control. So if we say I don't want any signals to go, in this case, higher than -6 dB, full scale, then they won't. So when I pull this threshold down from there, you can see these meters are just like bricked into there. They will not go over that level. And to the absolute detriment of the music, they will not go above that level. So I can smash the smithereens out of this, which I recommend you don't do. But and look at that, I'm completely destroying it, but it will not go past that. So it's a fantastic kind of digital insurance policy to make sure the levels stay within the area that you specify. Now, it's not going to stop you distorting in some ways, because if you push a limiter too hard, you're going to distort, but it will stop you blatantly clipping. So if you set a ceiling of 0 dB, then you are not going to get ugly digital distortion that you would normally get if you slam into that 0 ceiling without a limiter there. I mean, as we all know, if digital goes above 0 dB full scale, you're going to get the ugliest, most disgusting clipping that you could possibly get. And that's totally unacceptable. So this will prevent that, while at the same time allowing you to push up levels and get maximum resolution out of your track. Now, in some cases, it is quite easy to set the limiter using this method. I mean, if I know that I'm going out to a CD, I can set my out ceiling to, let's say, negative 0.3 dB. So that's just an arbitrary figure that I use, but some people, for safety, like to bring it all the way down to 1 dB below 0. Seldom do we really want it on exactly 0, because especially in this era of MP3 files and things where audio really does get a battering, and people are playing things out of cheap converters and out of their computer sound cards and so on, you want to leave a little bit of headroom just in case there's error in there. So I used to always use negative 0.3, but sometimes I'll even do less. But just for this example, I'll leave it there. I mean, you can set these limiters really fast. I could play this other track, as I said, by New York rock band The Blems. Now this one's a lot lower, you can see. Now I can just grab the threshold, pull it down until I'm kissing that ceiling. Let's say there. Yep, and we're getting a little bit of attenuation there. And there we have it, we've set it. But an even better way to do this, let's put them both up at 0 again, is to grab this control here, which simultaneously moves both the threshold and the out ceiling in synchronous. Now the beauty of that is, as the threshold is turning up the sound, the out ceiling is turning down the sound, so they offset each other. So I could play here, and under the limiting threshold, as we well are there, I'll keep moving that. Look, no change in volume at all, because one's offsetting the other. So the beauty of this now is when I do get low enough to actually start activating some limiting, we'll be able to hear immediately if we're hurting the sound or not, and we can set it for the optimum level based on that. So let's just have a listen. So nothing's happening at this stage. We'll get down to sort of 10, 11. Here we go, now we've got a bit of action. Alright, so we've got some reasonable limiting happening there, and now I can just bypass on and off, and the levels are going to be very similar. So we want to be listening to transients like snare hits and so on. Okay, now I'm monitoring very softly here, so I'm not hearing too much change there. So for the sake of a good example, let's hurt it a bit more. There we go, now I'm limiting quite hard. Okay, I wouldn't want to do much more than that, but there we go, a 17 decibel increase. Now obviously the average level of this track was quite low to start with, so that's a bit misleading, but we're boosting it by 17 dB. And now that we're happy with that amount of threshold, we just go back here and say 0.3 again, and we're back. And now it'll be loud, so watch your ears. And I don't care. Ooh, and now I can hear that I've hit it way too hard, but we can back that off a little bit. And I don't care if I see the money. But you get the idea. In a critical monitoring situation, when you're on your own, you can turn it up nice and loud. You can grab this control, bring it down, find that optimum spot at which you're balancing volume and possible deterioration of the sound, and then you're golden from then on. Now, another really useful use for this out ceiling control here is, say, here in Australia, when you're doing music for television commercials, there's a rule that your audio tracks are to be limited to negative 10 dB full scale, sometimes negative 9. It varies between networks, I've discovered. So that sort of thing is so easily achieved, literally by just negative 10, and there we go. And now this same song, which was up at a sort of a CD hot level before, is now ready to be delivered in a TV commercial type situation. And there it is. So the exact same amount of limiting is being applied, but now the whole output is being limited to negative 10. So simple to use, and we're away. Now let's just have a little look at the benefits that this arc control brings to the party. Now what I'll do here is open up that L1 again. Now I've got the same tracks here feeding into both the L1 subchannel and the L2 subchannel up there. So they're getting the same input, and on the L1's strip here, I've also included just a little DigiRack plugin doing nothing but inverting the phase, as we said before, to create a null environment. So now I'll go back to this first track because it's hotter and it'll be easier at a lower threshold to get some action happening. I'm going to set this L1 to 6 dB of push down, and I'll leave the out setting at 0 just for this exercise. So same with this one. And I'll match that also to 6 dB. So now we have 6 dB of limiting occurring in both processes. And this one is phase inverted. I'm going to turn the arc off and I'll unmute this strip here. Okay. We've got nothing. And we can see they're both operating together and the limiting seems to be exactly the same. So this is kind of furthering my point that the L1 and the L2 are virtually the same except for this arc control here. Now let's get a bit more adventurous. Let's take it down to 10 dB. Now we are now crushing this song more than you ever would, but this is just for the sake of comparing the processes. Now that looks like total silence to me. There might be a little bit there. I'm just going to turn up my monitoring. Now there's a little bit of crunching going on in the background very softly. So there is something in this, so that maybe they're not exactly the same, but they're near as damn it. They're very, very close. But listen to what happens when I turn the arc control on. Now that difference we're hearing are the benefits that the arc system is bringing. That crunch is what's going through the L1 that the L2 is not. Turn the arc off. Back on. So that's showing us the benefits of the arc system in so much as these are the artifacts that the L1 is generating simply because it's got this fixed release. Now we could change the L1's release, but we're never going to be able to match that. I mean, look. So we're slowing down the release on the L1. But no, we're looking for a null point. No, but we'll never find it because the arc is varying the release time dynamically all the time, very, very quickly. So we'll never be able to match that. I'll close this off and sum up by saying that that's pretty much all we've got to say about the L2. Now, the other Waves L series processors that we're going to talk about, the L3 and the L316, are more complicated and they've got a little bit more to discuss. But this is a pretty straightforward, simple device. Stick it at the end of your chain, make sure it's the very last thing and you're not processing things after it if you're using the dithering section. And it's your final insurance policy to make sure that your digital audio is maximized and stays at the ceiling that you set. Next up, we're going to talk about the IDR system in more detail. So see you there.